Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be doing a review on one of my most anticipated films of the year. And yes, it's right up there with Spider-Man No Way Home. Actually, I'll argue that this film was the one I had been looking forward to the most in watching. Last Night in Soho by Edgar Wright. If you guys don't know Edgar Wright, he's the director of movies like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Baby Driver, and Shaun of the Dead. With previous film reviews I've done, I don't really mention the directors, but I like Edgar Wright as a director, so there will be moments where I'll mention some of his other works as they relate to this film. So Last Night in Soho follows Eloise Turner, who moves to London from the countryside to study fashion. When she moves into an apartment in Soho, she begins to dream of Sandy, an aspiring singer from the 60s who used to live in Eloise's apartment. Dreams and reality begin to blur the more Eloise emulates Sandy in the 60s, the decade that Eloise romanticizes. Things take a darker turn when Eloise realizes that the 60s were not at all glamorous and nostalgic as she thought it to be. So here are some words I would use to describe the film. Amazing, intense, and beautiful. Yes, I pretty much have nothing but praise for this film. This film was well worth the wait and it didn't disappoint me. I was kind of worried that it might be a little too scary for me since I'm not really a horror fan, and the film was marketed as a psychological horror film. But it was the right amount of horror, definitely perfect for Halloween. Again, I'm not even a psychological horror fan, but this movie was so good. I normally also judge a film based on its impact on me. So I watched Last Night in Soho on the 28th and I'm still thinking about it to this day. It's got mystery vibes, time travel vibes, and a sense of nostalgia for the 60s. And of course there's a mystery to be solved and it kept me intrigued the entire time. So I thought that in terms of the plot, the overall pacing and structure was just really well done. Yeah, you have to establish the characters and the setting first before jumping into the action of the plot. So Edgar Wright did an amazing job there. I will go in depth about my thoughts on the plot later in the spoiler section of this video. The casting was also so perfect and so on point. From the very first moment we're introduced to Eloise, you get this air of innocence and genuine sweetness from her, but she's also quite shy and jittery. Thomasin McKenzie was the perfect choice for Eloise because she embodies that sweetness and innocence of a girl who's never been in the big city. She was just so adorable that I wanted to protect her from the moment we were introduced to her character, and her acting throughout the entire film was just spectacular. Then we also have Anya Taylor-Joy, who plays Sandy. Anya had this air of elegance and confidence with her character, and just like with Thomasin, her acting was amazing. Both of these actresses were just perfectly cast. The visuals and soundtrack were incredibly amazing too. The use of neon lights were almost reminiscent of Hitchcock's Vertigo's dream sequence, so that was really cool. And Edgar Wright is also really great at utilizing real-life locations. He did it with Toronto and Scott Pilgrim, and he did an amazing job of it with Last Night in Soho. The soundtrack was just a banger, honestly. If you've seen Baby Driver, you know the film has an amazing soundtrack, and that's the case with this film too. The songs are mainly from the 60s, and it really just enhances your viewing experience of the film. So jumping off of that point then, I also loved the editing and transitions within the film. There are several instances in the film where a character, particularly Ellie, would play a song on her music player or her record player and it's playing diegetically. And then it would transition from this diegetic music to a non-diegetic music. I just thought that was just a really cool move and it really helps immerse you into the story world. So another thing about the editing that I loved, and this was shown in the official trailer and teaser trailer, so it's still not a spoiler, but the scene where we would see Sandy and then when she looks in the mirror you see Ellie or vice versa, I just absolutely love the editing that they did, and it's not just obvious whenever we see Sandy pass by a large mirror. We also still see Ellie whenever Sandy would pass by like any form of a reflective surface. Sometimes it's really subtle, but it's consistent, and I love that. So that's the spoiler-free review. It's an amazing film, and I cannot recommend enough that you watch it in a theater if you can. So now that I've given my spoiler-free review, it's time for me to talk about the film more in depth. So if you haven't seen the film yet and are planning to, skip this part of the video because this will contain massive and major spoilers for the film. So like I said, I have nothing but praise for this film. But I was on Letterboxd and to give a really quick review of the film, and people were complaining about the third act and how everything just seemed to either come out of the blue and made no sense. I personally love the twist, and I didn't see any of it coming. And I didn't think that the third act was unintentionally messy. It is a psychological horror film. We're meant to watch Ellie unravel because of the toll her gift and her experiences were taking on her. Her mental and emotional state is gonna be whack, and that should be reflected in the events of the film, which I felt that it did. I will say this. I had only really clued in on the fact that Sandy might not be dead like Ellie believed after her conversation with the old guy. But even then, I'm like, maybe not, And apart from that, there was a scene where Ellie is researching old newspapers for news of a woman being murdered, but it's mainly about missing guys. I love that, by the way, especially when she realized that her landlady was Sandy and had killed the men who abused her. Just having those news headlines that Ellie saw flashing through them, that was foreshadowing I didn't expect, but I loved it. I will also admit that at first, the violence and the creepy guys that Ellie experienced, it was very hard to watch, especially at the beginning. And I remember watching it and I'm like, why do you need to show us this? And as the movie went on, and I also saw the violence that Sandy experienced at the hands of the men, and I'm like, okay, I see the parallels now and I get it. So good for Sandy for killing those guys though. Sometimes you can't gaslight, gatekeep, and girl boss, so you gotta manslaughter instead. The scene with the revelation that she hid those bodies in the apartment was so messed up. But visually, I love the use of the red filter in that scene. Thematically, it's giving me Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe vibes. And it made sense as to why Ellie was a lot more affected by the ghosts of those men. Not just because of her gift in seeing spirits, but because she's literally surrounded by dead bodies. So overall, Last Night in Soho was just an amazing film. I will even go as far to say that it's one of the best films I've watched this year. The plot was beautifully structured, the casting was on point, the visuals were stunning, and the soundtrack was a banger. Edgar Wright is an amazing director, and I can't wait to watch his future projects. And I cannot recommend enough that people watch this film because it really is amazing and well done. And that's a wrap on Last Night in Soho. My next video will hopefully be up by late November, and it's going to be on the Eternals. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to comment or subscribe.